Rather lads, welcome back to 99 Sports. And Barcelona have been humiliated at the Camp Nou by Eintracht Frankfurt 3-2. And honestly, that result looks a little bit better. It doesn't pick, it doesn't point the real picture, the actual picture of what went on, or of what went on, throughout the 90 minutes. Because Frankfurt, that was a masterclass. They didn't play very well in terms of having the ball possession. Probably their statistics in terms of ball possession and having it and distribution is not the best, but that was a masterclass from the manager. And honestly, this game, Xavi lost it for Barcelona. There is no other reason. Xavi lost it, and look, Frankfurt, they were absolutely spot on. Played two blocks, the first block had a 5, the second block had a 4, and Barcelona could not beat either of those blocks until the 90th minute. 3-0 it was by minute 90, and Barcelona could not come back in that game. But what a masterclass from Eintracht Frankfurt. The first thing I want to talk about in this game is FC Barcelona. The way Xavi set out, I thought it was there was a problem with the selection of the team. Played that usual 4-3-3, but in this this time he played Pedri, Gavi, and Busquets in the midfield. He dropped Frankie De Jong, and I thought that was a mistake because Pedri, Frankie De Jong, and Sergi Busquets, I think they've been really playing very well together. Dembele, Aubameyang, and Ferran Torres. Ferran Torres had a really ugly night today. So did Aubameyang. I think the spark of life was Ousmane Dembele, despite the fact that no one could get at the end of the balls. He was actually throwing into the final third. But what happened for Barcelona, and this is a problem that I think Xavi is gonna deal with, whether Busquets and Piqué are on the pitch or whether they have retired, is gonna deal with this problem today. Busquets, right from minute 1 to minute 90, he was absolutely anonymous. And he was not anonymous because he had a very poor game. What happened? Because he got a goal, like he scored a goal, and it was disallowed, and then he scored another, and which stood the first goal for Barcelona. And then you might think maybe this is where you say Busquets had a good game, but he had a very poor game. And I think Eintracht Frankfurt, who is their manager, because I just need to point out their manager, absolutely outstanding from Glasner, absolutely outstanding. What they did is they isolated Sergi Busquets. And when you isolate Sergi Busquets, because that is how Barcelona play, he's the best of the midfield. He is the engine. He's the brain. He's everything for Barcelona offensive-wise and defensive-wise. And of course, you've seen it. They could just cut through that midfield just like a hot knife through butter when they were, on the counter-attack, which I think they really did very well through players like Knauf and Kamada. But also, think about this. Sergi Busquets was surrounded by 4 players, on that evening. The striker Morey, Kamada, Lillestrom, Kostic, and then Rod. More than 4 players were surrounding Sergi Busquets, and what that did, it created it left Barcelona with only 2 options. That is Pedri and Gavi in the midfield. Literally, they could not create overloads in the midfield, and I think that's the problem with total football and positional play. If you are outnumbered at any point in time, because we know Ferran Torres and Ousmane Dembele always stay wide, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang doesn't get involved in the build-up play as other teams, as other strikers. So he stays up top. Dembele, Ferran Torres, they stay wide to beat fullbacks. One-on-one, which was actually not happening, because what Frankfurt did is they played a back 5, right? Starting out the game, it looked like a back 3 with Ndika, Toure, and then Hinterga. But if you look at it, the reality of it is that Rod fell into the back line, just like Jakic. So they had a back 5, and that means Ousmane Dembele was struck by 2 players out wide. So so was Ferran Torres. Actually, Ferran Torres had a very, very quiet night. Apart from that moment in the first half where he skipped past, Toure and Knauf, I don't remember any other moment. I do not really remember any other moment where he showed any kind of brilliance. So Barca in this game, they were looking for options. They were looking for those numbers in the midfield to create overloads. They were not there. They were absolutely beaten. That is beaten hands down, and I think Xavi needs to deal with this problem, because at some point in time you will not have that Sergio Busquets. Of course, they really play well when Sergio Busquets plays well. At some point in time you will not have Gerard Piqué, who I think is actually a very key member of this squad now. This is when I realize it, because honestly, Gerard Piqué, his absence meant that none of Araujo and Eric Garcia would provide that quality to join the midfield. And honestly, that means that your three midfielders in the midfield were as isolated as kids in the desert. They were just isolated. Busquets taken out of the game, like 90 minutes taken out of the game. Pedri, I mean, he was taken even. He took him off, which I think was a problem. Which I think was a mess, a bigger mess. Because I honestly, I thought Pedri was still doing something more than Gavi. I don't feel I didn't really think Gavi had a good game. I thought he would have put off Gavi, introduced Frankie De Jong, and then probably Pedri, because we've seen Pedri. He's always available to receive the ball in those tight spaces. He can work well in tight spaces. He can work well in quick combinations. But also, what Barcelona needed in this game was individual brilliance, and the only player that was providing that was Ousmane Dembele, switching wings all the time, the dynamism that he was providing. But it wasn't enough, and I thought Pedri would have provided that probably in the second half if you introduced a player like Frankie De Jong. But the bottom point, Xavi, Barcelona have been absolutely beaten today. Those two blocks of 4 and 5, literally, I do not remember, because it was like a 5-5-0. This was like a 5-5-0. It's the first time I've looked at a team so disciplined. Of course, we saw this with Atletico Madrid in midweek against Manchester City. But the difference, with that Atletico Madrid side is it reached a point where they were desperate. They started pouring numbers up front. They've not done that. Frankfurt have not done that. Actually, if you look at how they've been operating on the break, it's just a few names. You had Murray up front, you had Kamada on the left, you had Lindstrom on the right, then followed by Kostic and Knauf. Those are the only players that have been getting involved in ball progression. The rest of the players have been staying, keeping a low block, either just stretching it to the midfield or even keeping it as deep as possible. And what a game! What a game! I mean, if you're Barcelona, I think Xavi will be going, what didn't we do right? And I think what they didn't do right was they didn't try to find out what Eintracht Frankfurt found out in the first leg. Because I think in the first leg they found out that, look, again, they were better. They were interesting. It was a very, very interesting context. They created many chances. But what they found out was this Barcelona side don't allow them so much time on the ball. And that's why you see that they played two low blocks. Very, very stiff, very, very well positioned. But it just looked like the upper block, which had the likes of Knauf, which had the likes of Kamada, which had the likes of Kostic, was pressing Barcelona, and they were going into that kind of not very high press, because they were not pressing Barcelona in their own half. Actually, they contained the game in Frankfurt contained the game in their own half. But what I loved about them is they were always trying to make sure that Barcelona do not have so many touches before any defensive action. I think this is where you talk about the ratio of their defensive actions per per 90, and they've been so brilliant. They've been very, very brilliant. You've seen them, Pedri on the ball, they attack you in numbers, they just overcrowd you, they hunt in packs, and when you beat them, they go back in shape. When they dispossess you, they have those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, or 1, 2, 3, 4 players who go up front, and they've been causing Barcelona all sorts of problems because they've been very, very quick. They've been lightning quick, and that is how you beat Barcelona. It's not only Barcelona. We've seen it with Manchester City. We've seen it with all clubs that play in the similar way to Xavi's. The way you beat them is pick up the ball, but move it at a very, very high speed. If you looked at that Manchester City Liverpool game, in the second leg, which we watched last weekend, I mean, it just brings out the idea of what I'm talking about. Liverpool kind of sitting in that midfield, creating those blocks, very, very disciplined blocks. But what they did, in the end was, okay, we've created these blocks, but when we get the ball, then we move it very, very fast, to hurt Manchester City. And that's what, Frankfurt have done. They're moving the ball very fast, and there is no goal they have scored, and they had any kind of build-up. It was always direct. It was always very, very fast. And we know Barcelona's defenders, Araujo, Eric Garcia. Look, when you play directly at them, they're never gonna survive it. But let's talk about the brilliance of Frankfurt. Let's talk about their game. This is how they started out, right? They played a 3-4-3, right? With Ndika, Hintrega, Torre in a back three. Then Kostic, Rod, Jakic, and Knauf in that kind of midfield block, right? And then above them, you had Kamada, who had a really, really very, very good game. You had Lindstrom, who had a very good game as well. And then you also had More, who is their striker, right? Who was their striker. And of course, Kostic scored twice in that game. But, so that is how they stayed out. But right from minute one, you know what they did? They fell into a back five. Rod and Kostic just became, natural centre backs. And right from minute 1 to minute 90, that did not change. Rod and Jakic falling into the defense to make a back five on Dika, Rod, Jack, Hitrenga, and Torre. And then you had a midfield, another block ahead of them of 4. They had Kamada, you had Kostic, you had Kamada, you had Lindstrom, and you had Knauf. And then you had one player in Murray who was going to always act as a target man. And because Barcelona are so good at pressing, not really pressing, but they're so good at pressing, and they're so good at just bringing the ball forward. Murray would drop, and it would occasionally become a 5-5-0 formation. But you know what? The discipline of Frankfurt is what is amazing. They didn't fall out of that shape at any point in time. They didn't. They left Dembele out wide. They left Ferran Torres out wide as well. And not at any point in time did you feel like Barcelona is bending them and they're about to break. There was no time when you felt like Barcelona are stretching them and they're about to be torn apart. It was not there. They kept the shape very, very well. Man of the match for me, it's got to be Kostic, because the amount of trouble. Obviously, I think Knauf had a very, very good game as well. But the amount of trouble Kostic has caused those lads is unbelievable. It's really, really unbelievable. He's been running, all day long. He was running throughout the 90 minutes. He never stopped running, and that's how you get this Barcelona side, frustrated. You always, you've got to run at them. You've got to, do something better than them. You've got to work harder than them, and that's what Frankfurt did in this game. But Xavi, two or three things for Xavi. Xavi got this wrong, absolutely wrong. Pedri, for me, plays 90 minutes in this game, unless it is injury. But Pedri plays 90 minutes. Gavi doesn't start in this game. Frankie de Jong plays 90 minutes in this game as well. And when they needed the kind of inspiration, I understand why he brings on Adama Traore. I understand why he brings on Luke de Jong, because he's looking for a goal and he's trying to throw all those number 9s on, because he takes off Aubameyang, which is rightly so, because I thought Aubameyang was a little bit shit today. But he takes off Aubameyang, then he brings in Luke de Jong, right? Then he also brings on Adama. Then he takes off Ferran Torres, and then he introduces Memphis Depay. I think the first substitution I would have made in that game, the way it started, I would have introduced. Honestly, I can't lie. I would have introduced Sergio Dest, because Alba was not up front, was not creating anything. And despite the fact that they were playing this kind of elbow kind of defensive system where you have Alba high up the pitch, and you had Mingueza a little bit deeper to form that kind of back three when they're in position. That side with where you had Mingueza, there was no creativity. There was no support to the wingers. So I would have introduced Dest on that side. And then the other thing I would have done, if I was Xavi, bring on Dest, bring on Frankie de Jong, keep Pedri on, right? And then talk to the boys in the dressing room. It is too slow. They made it so easy for Frankfurt. It was too slow. I mean, you can't play in the hands of your enemy just like that. It was too slow. They were comfortable. Just imagine, at that pace, you have to beat 2 low blocks of 5-5. Because they had one in front that was pressing, that was doing the pressing, the running around, the disruption, because that was tasked with make sure they're not comfortable. And they did it very well. The likes of Kamada, the likes of Knauf, they did it very well. They were always intercepting, right? And then you had this other low block, which was its job was to deal with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang so that he doesn't get those runs in behind. Run with him and make sure when he comes back, you come back with him so that you don't create, he doesn't overstretch your back line. And it happened. And then the other thing was you had to deal with Ferran Torres and Ousmane Dembele. And the real thing, lads, it looked like Frankfurt today played 15 players against 10 for Barcelona. Because how can you tell me that Dembele was being tracked by 2 players? If you've watched that game very well, 2 players, and that was Ndika and Rod, right? And then you had Ferran Torres also tracked by 2 players. That was Toure and Knauf, right? Right? And so that means that you had players like Hitrenga and Jakic literally there to track the runs of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. So every player on the forward line of Barcelona was being tracked by 2 players, simply overpowered. And that's why I think Frankfurt deserve more credit than anyone will give them, because the fact that they had 2 men on each forward, on each Barcelona forward, meant that they would then compromise their pressures, in the midfield. It didn't happen. Actually, they somehow managed to overcrowd Busquets. So there was no link between Busquets and the offensive part of Barcelona. It was ugly. It was absolutely disgusting from Frankfurt. That was a good game. And I hope I watch more of those. I'm a Barcelona fan. It was ugly, honestly. But we move. Cossy, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll speak to you in the next one.